Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our inaugural Shattering the Stigma event sponsored by SalusCare, our area's most comprehensive provider of mental health and substance abuse treatment services. I'm going scripted, and then now I'm going to go off. Not that bad, Sue. Really, good morning. This is really a great morning because this is our first event. And Todd just told me we have 133 of you present. So for a first-time event around this type of topic, kudos to you all. So everybody give yourselves a big round of applause. It's so important, this whole topic that we're going to be discussing today about shattering this stigma that we have. There's got to be a time, hopefully in the near future, where we quit talking about behavioral health separate from so-called physical health. They both contribute to each other. They're both health care. And we just need to get over the stigma that is attributable to mental health and behavioral health care issues so that we can really start shining the light on an issue that there are so many responses and answers, and they keep evolving every year. But unless we discuss it, we're not going to move forward. So again, thank you everyone for being here. My name's Marshall Bauer. I happen to be the chair of the SalusCare Board of Directors, and I'm very proud of that because we've got a great group of people that the board gets to work with. So rather than naming everyone other than the aforementioned Sue Eckert, will the board members, if there are any others here, please stand up so we can recognize you at this time. Okay, Dr. Isaacs is in the back. There we go. And I know we've got several of our staff here taking the advantage of getting their continuing education credits, whatever you call them. In the law, we call them something different. Their CLEs, their CEUs for you guys. So kudos for you guys. Well, the wonderful dedicated staff of SalusCare, please stand up so everybody can see who you are. So I'm excited to kick off this event and honored to welcome activist, advocate, and storyteller Emily Robinson to Fort Myers. She comes from the East Coast, she told me, from Hollywood, I think she said. And I told her she's finally over on the nicer side of the state, where we got prettier beaches. But we're becoming more and more like the East Coast in terms of our population. Her topic, We Are All Just Humans, Breaking Down Stigma and Building Up Humanity Through Storytelling, is sure to be an honest and emotional look at what life is like providing care for her mother who suffers from schizophrenia. In addition, this happens to be Mental Health Awareness Month and has been observed in the United States since 1949. There's good and bad to that to me. The good is we've been doing this since 1949. The bad is this room should be filled up with people and all kinds of photographers and the news media and everyone else celebrating and talking about the advances we made and so much more work that we've got to do. But I'm a glass half a full kind of guy this morning. I usually am every single day. So we're going to say this is wonderful that we continue to observe this month as a month talking about these issues around behavioral health care and mental health. Its purpose is to raise awareness and educate the public about mental illness, the realities of those living with illnesses, and strategies for attaining, next page, mental health and wellness. Additionally, it strives to reduce the stigma surrounding mental illness. And again, that's exactly why we are here today, to shatter that stigma. So give us a big round of applause for why we're here today. Thank you to all of you for supporting SalusCare and our mission to provide exceptional and compassionate behavioral health care. Now I want to turn this over to our leader, our president and CEO, Stacy Cook-Hawk, for some remarks from her. But before I do, I just want to embarrass her for a second. How long you been doing this now?
Over 20 years.
No, how long you been CEO?
About a year and a half.
Okay. She doesn't look anywhere old enough, at least standing up here next to this old guy, to have been doing this for 20 years. And when I introduce her to people, they always come up to me afterwards and go, Marshall, that's the woman you put in there as CEO. And it is, and I'm proud to say so. She brings with it a wealth of experience, and she has really, really helped lead this agency into the next millennia that we're moving forward on. Since SalusCare was formed out of two great organizations here in Southwest Florida. So please help me in welcoming our CEO, Stacy Cook-Hawk.
I'm going to do the same thing that Marshall does. I'm going to read a little, and then I'm going to go off of script a little as Todd cringes a little. Thank you, Marshall, and good morning to everyone. Thank you for being here. That the room is filled and we oversold the tickets that we had designated to sell is incredible. We are shattering stigma right here and right now. We're excited to have you here at the Broadway Palm. This is our inaugural event, Shattering the Stigma. So please, before we go on, can we give ourselves an applause, because this is the start of something big in this room right now, and I want us to take advantage of this energy. Thank you. We're so fortunate to have Emily here today. Emily, thank you for making the trip from Hollywood here. And I have to tell you a little bit of the history, because you know there's always a story to how we got to today. And Michelle Sutherland, our executive assistant. Michelle, can you please stand up? I know.
Hey, Michelle.
Michelle found an article in the Huffington Post, and it was titled, "The Times I Wish My Mom Had Cancer." And she sent it to me, and she said, you have to read this. You're going to feel this. And I did. I read it, and I read it again, and I read it again, and I did feel it. It was incredibly written, and I knew immediately. Michelle, Todd, and I got together and talked about bringing Emily here to help us shatter stigma. Emily writes, cancer gets acceptance. Schizophrenia gets questions and judgments. Cancer gets meal trains. Schizophrenia gets isolation and lost friends. Cancer gets balloons and rooms decorated in the hospital and flowers and visits. Schizophrenia gets locked doors and cell phones turned in at the nurse's station. Cancer can lead to long years of enduring pain, suffering, and death, just as schizophrenia can. I was moved by Emily's words and told Michelle, again, we absolutely have to bring Emily to Southwest Florida, if she'll come to Southwest Florida. And after many conversations, back and forth, and planning, we have the distinct honor today of having Emily here with us to share her story, to support our Shattering the Stigma event, and we are so excited. Thank you so much. Next, what we're going to do before I step away is we're going to have lunch, get the bellies full, and then we're going to start the show. Thank you again.
I'm just going to start right here and then mosey on to my storytelling chair. Thank you for inviting me here today. I'm really, really honored to be the first person to be presenting at this important topic. Stigma is something that's really important and the most important thing that I talk about. So thank you for coming. I'm really honored to be here. And now I'm going to sit down and tell some stories. When I thought about how to start this presentation, with a lot of mental health topics, you don't know where to start. There's any number of ways to start, so I thought I would start at the beginning with my birth. I need my AV guy, my husband, Gio, to help me along here with the slides. So this is a map from Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri to Champaign, Illinois. So my story literally begins with my mother. She's overdue with me. She's in the last part of her pregnancy, and she's completely sick, psychotic, hearing voices, waiting for me to be born. And she had made the decision to not take her medication because she was afraid of how it might affect me in utero. So she's with my dad, and my dad's an Army soldier. And they're in Fort Leonard Wood, and so she was really overwhelmed with her pregnancy, and she was hearing voices. And so one night while my dad was sleeping, she went into the car, no coat on, no shoes. It's mid-January in Missouri in 1978, and got into the car and started driving, hearing voices and really feeling afraid of what was happening with her, what was happening with her body, what was happening with the birth, and mostly just really sick and unmedicated and needed a lot of help. So she was headed to her parents' house in Champaign, Illinois, and when I think of this story and I think about my mom, what could have happened during that drive, it became kind of a mythic story. My mother, sick with me, took off in the snow with no shoes on, no coat. She arrived at her parents' house. It's about a 5-hour drive. And I can only imagine what it must have been like for her that night in the little car with her big belly and the voices in her head, and the way the heater must have felt in the car, and the lights and the traffic. And I think all of us, even for me driving at night, is kind of scary sometimes. And I think of my mom, who was really sick with me and making that long journey. Any number of things could have happened along the way, but she made it. And when she arrived, her parents took her back home to Fort Leonard Wood, where my dad was stationed, and they put her into the psychiatric ward and gave her Haldol at that time. And when she talks about it, she says, I was pretty doped up, And so a couple days later, she went into labor naturally with me, and I was born. And she says, and I wrote down, so I asked her about my birth before I did this presentation. I asked her to tell me about what it was like, and she said, I remember the lady who told me to breathe, she recounts about my birth. I remember that you were the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. No, really, she always adds insistently. I held you like an egg. I thought you might crack. I had no idea what I was doing. I was born a little bit overdue, so I was stained with meconium, and they had to take me, I think, to the NICU for a little bit. And she also says, the people who I did group therapy with in the psychiatric ward all wrote me a congratulations card. That was really nice. And when I think about the gifts that I got as a mother, flowers from people, normal, typical, well-adjusted birth, and I think that my mom was touched by the people that were in the psychiatric ward, wrote her a card. It's kind of an unusual detail about my birth. So I have a joke that I tell about this, and they say I was really overdue, and I say, well, I wasn't coming out until she was medicated. There was no way I was going to arrive until she was ready for me. And so anyway, that's the story of my birth. And superheroes have this thing called like an origin story, what leads them to where they are. And I think that really is kind of my origin story. Her schizophrenia and the way I arrived is part and parcel for everything that I do in my life now. Her illness has affected the person I am right now, right this minute. Everything I do, everything I think, every way I relate to everybody is because of that illness and the experiences that have been brought about living with a mother with schizophrenia. So this is the map. Oh, go back, sorry, sweetie. The map is the journey, and I hadn't ever looked at the map until just recently, and it really brought home how far she drove in that state with a big pregnant belly and no shoes on and no coat in the middle of winter in Missouri. So, and part of the reason I want to show you this map is because I'm a storyteller. And seeing this map and hearing that story makes it more real. And it's not about schizophrenia, it's about my mother and this journey that she took, and it's something that you all can probably relate to. So go to the next one. Back. One more. Nope, sorry. So why tell this story? Well, because it's about schizophrenia, And even that word is still, even when I say the word schizophrenia, I have this little thing that happens, and that's stigma kind of poking me in the back when I say schizophrenia. It's such a big word. It's not about schizophrenia. It was about a mother who was sick, who was nervous and afraid and doing something that was her instinct, which was to care for herself and her baby. Because any woman who has been pregnant with their first child can relate to those sort of nervous feelings that you have at the end of your pregnancy. Because my mother loved me, and she had to make a hard, potentially devastating choice to not take her medicine because she was worried about what that might have done to me. Because it's a happy story, and it's a sad story, and it's a complicated story. Because the average person, when they hear the word schizophrenia, doesn't think of a story like this one. And because it's the beginning of my story. So you can. Okay, so who the heck am I? A few people wondered if I had a book. Nope, I don't have a book. I am a storyteller. I started this project just over a year ago in April, which is kind of incredible that I'm here and it's only been about a year. I am the daughter of a woman who has schizophrenia, and for too many years I didn't speak about it except to one-on-one or friends and family, but I wasn't public about it, which is a lot of, that's a pretty familiar feeling for most people who have dealt with mental illnesses. We don't speak about it publicly because of stigma. I'm not a doctor, I'm not a social worker, I'm not an expert, never written a book or a study. I just tell stories, that's what I do. So about a year ago in April, my mom was in the hospital, and she wasn't taking my calls. And my mother really loves me, and we're really close. And to not, when she doesn't want to take my calls, it feels really isolating, and I feel really helpless. I don't know what's going on with her. I know that she still loves me, but I can't connect with her, and that's really frustrating and sad. And I came to a point where I just got so fed up with this feeling of isolation and nobody understanding, so I made a video. I put together some clips that I'd done over the summer when I visited her, and I decided to put it on YouTube, or on Facebook. And I didn't know what impact that video was going to have, but I'm going to show that video to you now. Go to the next one, and this is the first video that I ever posted. And you'll see some of my frustrations in not being able to reach my mom, and my feelings about what was going on with her at the time. You're on video now.
I love you both. You're beautiful girls. I adore you. I adore that picture of your owl. It made me giggle. Thank you.
That was a picture of an owl?
With the red bow.
Oh, the one she drew, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And you hung it up already?
Yes, I already hung it up.
Yeah.
I was going to show you.
I'm going to show right now. I'm going to go get the owl, okay?
Okay.
All right, hang on. Okay, Maddie, there's your owl. Grandma hung it up on the wall for you. She'll love that.
Okay.
What else do you want to tell
Guess what, Zoe and Maddie? I've got a picture your mama drew when she was 4 years old. It's two fish eating. Go show them that picture.
Okay, I'll show them the fish picture. Okay,
The
hold
fish
on.
picture.
Here's the fish picture from when I was little. Shy.
I'm so shy, Zoe and Maddie. I'm so shy, just like you are. Just like you are.
It's okay. Just tell them you love them.
I love you.
They know. They know.
I love you, Maddie. You're shy. I know that you are too. doctors I took. Something wrong,
You okay?
yeah.
It'll be cool to show them.
I did my best.
No, you did great. You did great.
I did my best. I gotta have a Coke and stuff.
Okay.
I have gratitude for Christmas.
Yeah. What else?
That I can cry.
Yeah.
I have
Sorry.
gratitude that I can cry. How wonderful you're in the world.
You're gonna make me cry. That's too much. Okay. Haven't seen that video on such a big screen. At the moment that I made that video, I was pretty desperate that my mom, because of an illness that she had become kind of invisible, and that was terrible. You know, that her house looked that way, and her life has been a certain way, all because of an illness that she didn't choose. And all because of stigma that prevents people from being comfortable enough to talk about these things, and that's ridiculous. So I just came to a breaking point and thought, I need to share this. Not only do I need to share this, I have to share this. I'm obligated to share this. I have a journalism degree, I have a camera, I have a voice, so I can be my mom's voice and make her have a voice in the world and be an important person like she is, so people can see her and they can see what schizophrenia is like, and not just the versions that were told in the media, you know, the cliche ideas of mass shooters or glamorization of mental illnesses, but just that my mother is this beautiful grandmother who's suffering, but who loves me, and she's funny and she's kind. And the idea for the name of my project, You Are in This World, came from the Elton John song that we sang together, Your Song. And so after I posted this video, talking about the power of a story, people really responded to it. And it turns out that a lot of people knew this story. A lot of people had a mom like me, or a brother, or a sister, or they were the person in the video. And fairly immediately, I got a lot of responses to my page. And I had the good fortune of working with a Facebook website called Upworthy, and they have several million followers. And so they did a story about the video and ran it, and then from then I went viral, you know, to sound cool about it. And so this is just a list of some of the places that have talked about this story and this project that I do. So in the beginning, I I knew that stigma was my mission, but I didn't know that that's why I was doing this. I just had this urge to share because it just didn't feel right. And after I put it up there and did some thinking, I realized that stigma really is at the heart of why this needs to be told, because stigma is what prevents this from being told. So we'll go on to the S word now, if you want to. Yeah, that one. Sorry. Why didn't I want to share this story? Well, I was really afraid. I was nervous. Her house, you can see in the video, is it's not clean, and so I did get some judgment on that. A lot of people had questions about, well, why don't they take better care of their mother? Why does their house look like that? And that was a big issue for me. So I was afraid of being judged. I was embarrassed. I had some shame. I was afraid of exploiting my mom. I wanted to be really careful about telling her story in a non-exploitative way that preserved her dignity and let people know that I really love her, and that's why I'm showing some things that people are uncomfortable with or that are really unflattering. Growing up with a mother with schizophrenia is a pretty unusual life in some ways. And so it's not really until recently that I've started to actually just be able to say, my mother has schizophrenia, with my head up high and my shoulders back, and just say it. The same way you would say my mother has diabetes, or my mother has cancer, or my mother has high blood pressure, or my mother has bunions. My mother has schizophrenia. And I've found that now that I can say that without cringing the way I used to, or make euphemisms, or say, well, my mom's kind of crazy, or like my mom's like, the way that we talk about mental illness. Usually when I say it that way, people respond with, oh, my brother has bipolar. And then we do this sort of like knowing nod, like, okay. But I have to say it first. I'm always the first one. I open up with, hey, my mom has schizophrenia. That's not how I introduce myself at parties, but not always. But it has informed so much of who I am that I do talk about it quite a bit. And I've gotten to a point where I can say it really easily now, and people respond really well to it and then share their story with me right back. The point of all of this, the point of telling stories, is to combat this ugly S word, stigma. And we all know about stigma, and we all know why it's something that we need to be working to fight against. So I put the definition up there. I thought it was kind of interesting, the origin of the word stigma actually has to do with a stigmata, like a mark, like a physical mark on your body. And I thought, well, that would actually be really helpful if we were marked, right? Like if I had, schizophrenia or bipolar tattoo, then we would all talk quite a bit about it. But part of the issue with stigma with mental health issues is that it's invisible unless it's visible, and when it's visible, it's usually because of a crisis. So that feeds into the stereotype. So you can move on to the next. So there's that fancy definition of stigma, and then when I think about all of the things that break down why we're not able to do better for people with mental illnesses, I really think it's stigma. I think stigma is the number one barrier to adequate health care for people who have severe mental illnesses, or any mental health illnesses, really. So I wrote my own definitions. I said, stigma is the socially approved bully that tells people who have no choice about their condition that they should be ashamed, hidden, and that they are not the same as everybody else. Stigma thrives on fear, judgment, and ignorance. It's a thick, dark cloud that hovers around beautiful people and makes them feel and seem inhuman and inapproachable. It hides them from others, making them invisible. If stigma was a person, she would be the proprietor of terrible Hollywood depictions of mental illness and the source of unbalanced, disproportionate media stories of violence and destruction. She would cackle and tell terrible jokes about crazy people and lunatics and see suffering as weakness, not vulnerability. Worst of all, she would have easily millions of people follow along with her, many of them who would probably not be friends with her if they were ever introduced to an alternative. So we just sort of take stigma for granted. It just happens in our life all the time. And the people who could do the most to combat it are the ones that are the victims of it. So someone like me who's a storyteller, I have the power to fight it, but I also have to step out and sit here in the lights and talk about it, which is a little unnerving. But the good news, if you want to go to my funny slide of here, I always thought it was funny in The Wizard of Oz, she's taken down by a bucket of water. I mean, that's ridiculous. Like, this whole movie is, you know, her in the sky and the flying monkeys and all this really terrifying, like, scary stuff. This is one of my childhood fears, the flying monkeys and the lady in the sky. And then Dorothy just accidentally douses her with water and she just melts, and that's it. Like, it was just water that took her out. And so storytelling is kind of like my bucket of water on stigma. Stigma is so pervasive, and it causes such a barrier for care for so many people. But if you just open your mouth and talk about things and show things and are honest and authentic, it knocks stigma down right away. You don't have to do much else except tell a story. And since that's what I'm good at and that's what I do, I figured, you know, I don't have the money to do research projects or anything like that. I'll just tell stories. And it turns out that it works. So I made a little superhero character. I think she looks like me, right? She says, wait, stop. I think you might have the wrong idea about that. Let me tell you a story so you can understand this complex topic with more empathy and understanding. Because, you know, all superheroes talk like that. And she's able to fight stigma with a single anecdote. I thought that was really clever. So let's see. Oh, how does sharing start? So how does sharing a story, well, I talked about that a little bit, but anecdotes have the power to make very complicated topics and ideas more digestible and relatable. So in thinking about this, because I don't ever know where to start, you know, how do I tell this story? If you Google mental health and jails, you're going to get a pile of stuff that is, well, I found something. It says, individuals with serious mental illnesses in county jails, a survey of jail staff's perspectives. And it's 86 pages. It's with a lot of big names, a lot of money, some important groups, and they spent a lot of time doing this really big research project. And one of the quotes I thought was funny from the jailer, mentally ill inmates at times require constant attention from several staff members, and we only have 5 per shift, so at times half of the staff can be dealing with a single inmate with a mental issue. Well, duh. I mean, we all know what the problem is. We already know that story. What struck me on that is that my mom went to jail once, and so I'm going to tell you that story. So the title of the presentation is Individuals with Serious Mental Illnesses in County Jails, a survey of jail staff's perspectives. My story is the time my mom went to jail and I had to bail her out. So my mom technically would be one of those people that was in that study in some way. So many years ago when I was her caregiver, she needed to renew her she needed to get a copy of her driver's license because she had lost her purse during one of her many psychotic breaks, and all of her credit cards and all of her identifying things were gone. And this is a very typical kind of thing. Like, you can't drive until you get a copy of your driver's license. You can't get your driver's license until you go to the DMV. So this was a big deal for us to go to the DMV. She was doing well, and I'm holding her hand in line, and she's nervous because we're in an official place and we have to do this thing. I'm like, Mom, it's going to be okay. You know, we have like hope about her driving again and getting some more independence, but just all you have to do is apply. It's okay. I'm right here with you. So we get up to the counter, and I know that she's nervous, but we're hanging in there. And so we get up there, and then the clerk is typing in, and then she like pauses and looks at us and then pauses. And I'm like, oh, you know, please let this be easy. And the clerk looks up and says, you have a warrant. And my mom's face, I mean my face, this was supposed to be something easy. Just go get a copy of a driver's license so that you can have independence. But no, you have a warrant. It turns out that her illness haunted her again right there in line. Earlier, about maybe even a year before, she was really sick and off of her medicine and went into her neighbor's house and broke the window. and the cops were called, and I guess a report was made, but it was never followed up on. And so I guess she had a warrant for this, but through the cracks, all of those kind of things that we say. And so at this point, the simple, mundane thing of getting a copy of her driver's license turned into this crisis right there in front of everybody. So they handcuffed her and took her right there. And so my eyes are welling up, and my mom is looking at me like, what the hell? You told me this was going to be fine. And they're taking her away in handcuffs. And so for the rest of the day, I spent learning about bail bonds and trying to figure out where the magistrate judge was, and just trying to figure out how to navigate this to get my mom out, because I was desperate that she didn't spend one night in jail, because that would have been horrible. And through some miracle, I did have a little bit of luck. I got into the judge right before 5 o'clock, and they agreed to let her out. And it was like still one of my biggest victories to date. And so my mom, I said, how are you, Mom? Are you okay? And she said, she was actually in a pretty good mood. I think maybe she thought it was like a little adventure. And she said that she was in, her other person that she was in there was a young girl with an addiction problem. And my mom gave me a hug, and she said, I felt really sorry for her. And that's my mom. She's awesome. So getting back to that study, keep going. So when you look at the title of that report that says individuals with serious mental illnesses in county jails, that's my mom. And the point of that is there's this big, important study with quotes about serious mental illnesses and inmates with these problems. But I don't think when we read those studies or hear about them or examine them in that way without a story attached that we are not moved if we don't know who those people are, that they belong to someone like my mom. And so those are some pictures of my mom, and she was the lady in the jail cell for that day. You can move to the next one. So I made a really cool graph that explains schizophrenia. There's no way to explain schizophrenia in a graph or a bucket of stats or anything at all. You cannot explain these illnesses, bipolar, depression, any of them, any flavor of mental health issue, with graphs and things. You can use graphs to supplement, but without stories, we're not going to get there. If people are listening to these topics and these important numbers and all of these research studies, if there's not a face that we can tie to that, if there's not a human on the other side, nothing's going to change. I'm convinced that it's never going to get any better. So some of the advantages of storytelling, you can go to the next one. Well, this is another clip, sorry. Trying to explain the broken system is impossible. The broken system, how many people have heard the broken system? Like the broken system. So this is a voicemail from my mom that explains the broken system in a way that you can relate to.
I finished flying you it's real happy, and then I started Harry Potter, and it's interesting. I haven't seen a social worker in about 4 weeks. Anyway, I don't know what to do. Anyway, how are you doing? How's your day going? Did you have a session, or did you sleep here, or did you go to the beach? Just wondering what you're up to. Taking down my call, and I hope you have everything's okay. I'm sure it is. Thinking about you and love you. Bye-bye.
So she says, I haven't seen a social worker in 4 weeks. I don't know what to do. Anyway, how are you? How's the beach? If I were to write a big, long rant about social workers or the system, I don't think I would get an audience for that. But just sharing a 1-minute voicemail clip from my mom where you can hear her voice, you can hear she's a person, you can hear she's loves me, and she also can't get a hold of her social worker and doesn't know what to do, and you can hear that in there. And that's a story that tells that big, big story in a small kind of bite-sized nugget. The other part of my project that's really important for me, and I mentioned this at the beginning, is giving my mom a voice, letting her be present even as she's been hidden most of her life because of this illness. So I have one more video to share of her, and it's a happier one. Oh, wait, not that one, sorry.
Everybody.
This one. Yeah, that one, sorry. Come on, Gio. Sorry for my AV, I don't know.
Everybody who has followed me and my daughter and my son and my grandchildren and knows the hell of mental illness. You have greatly touched my heart, made me cry with your letters. And I would like to say some people have more trouble than I do, and don't forget about them. Don't give up on them. Keep trying different medicine, or old medicine, or new medicine, whatever you have to do. I shake sometimes because of my medicine, but I would rather have my mind. I sometimes say my mind is in the bottle. I don't know what to say. I really don't. I've got a great daughter, awesome daughter. That's the guy I ever did was have her and Seth. Thank you again.
And in the morning after the night, I fall in love with the light. It is so pure I can't arrive without the fear of seeing my eyes.
So I was able to give my mom a voice through this project, and through her voice, other people have a voice. When they read my story and see my blog and my Facebook, they become visible and real and feel empowered to speak out. The other part, you can go to the next one. Stories are free, yay! Going back to that big, heavy study, I don't know how many hundreds of thousands of dollars it probably costs to interview a lot of jail people to say that we have a problem, we don't have enough jail staff. Not that that's not important, that's important work, and it needs to be done, and we need to have accountability and facts and data, but we also have to have stories attached to those things, and stories are cheap and easy and free. So I'm just me, and I just have my story, and I can arguably have as much impact on the way these issues are tackled just by sharing basic things like a voicemail or a video of my mom. So stories are free. Go to the next one. Stories build community. As I mentioned, community is a really big deal in mental health topics. We really need community. People feel really isolated, and that's part of what stigma does. It isolates people. So when you tell stories, other people feel strong enough to tell their stories, and then pretty soon people are introducing each other, and they're hugging, and they're talking, and then they have a friend, and it just starts with a story. I pulled this little clip, and this happens sometimes on my Facebook page. So Jan wrote about her daughter, and then Melissa writes, "Hi Jan, I would like to send you a friend request. My 28-year-old son is addicted to meth. We recently found out he's self-medicating for bipolar," and she goes on, and Jan says, "Melissa Smith, I'm here whenever you need me. This is a hard life," and then they connect. And that's awesome. Like, I told a story on Facebook, and these two people are friends now, and they're bonded over this really important topic in their life. And all I did literally was just tell a story, share my thing, and they went there because they wanted to hear about it because they feel lonely, and they found each other. So that's a really cool thing that storytelling does, and whether it's social media or in real life, that's what happens when you tell stories. And then going to the last one. Not everybody in here is going to go back and start a blog to conquer the world or do social media as I do. I use it because I'm a journalism person, and I like to have a big audience, and I like to use videos and photos and writing. But you don't need to have a big public audience. You don't have to sit on a stage with a light and a mic to do this. I tell my mom's story and our story one-on-one all the time. And so sharing your details can be a way to eliminate stigma one person at a time. And often when you touch one person at a time, the impact of seeing a person face to face can be as meaningful as sharing a story, in a 20-second Facebook post. And these are just a few examples. The time I learned about the woman sitting next to me on the airplane had a sister with bipolar. The time I learned my older daughter's teacher had a mom with severe depression. The time I made a best friend when she told me her father had schizophrenia also and killed himself. The time I learned my client has a sister with addiction problems and bipolar. The time I learned my younger daughter's teacher lost a brother to heroin and has a father with alcoholism. And the dozens of times I've told people about my mom and her illness and the details of our family's life. Literally every time I tell someone about our story, I hear another story back. And they feel stronger because we shared something. They feel emboldened to tell their story maybe to the next person, which is important. So if you think that you're just sharing with one person, you're really sharing with a lot more people because there's a butterfly effect of telling stories to each other. I'm going to tell just one quick story. This was the first time that my youngest daughter met my mom, and they were sharing, I'm a photographer in real life, and so they were sharing a photo book that I had made, and my mom has looked at my daughters and pictures up until this moment, and my daughter's maybe about 2 or 3 there. And it was a little awkward. The house is filthy and smells like smoke, and but my little girl didn't care, and so they sat and they bonded over my photos and their stories. They told stories together, and Maddie is her name. She was pointing out to my mom, all the things in the photos, and they were sharing a story. And the angels on the table, I thought were beautiful in the light, and I asked my mom about them, because she had them all set up and decorated the way moms get their house ready for when family comes. And she said she had dug them out of the church dumpster and glued them together. Some of the wings had fallen off, and one of them lost a trumpet, and the one on the end had too many pieces missing. And she said, well, I guess that one can aspire to more. And I thought it was such a beautiful moment, and the angels and my daughter and the photos that I took and the stories that they were sharing. And so I'm going to end with one of my favorite quotes. It took me a long time to understand why this is so important, but someone I loved once gave me a box full of darkness, and it took me years to understand that this too was a gift. And that pretty much sums up everything about my mom and our story. So.